Globalisation has not only shaped the economic, political, legal and technological landscapes of societies, it has also had an enormous impact on culture and how cultures interact with one another. Think about what you've done in the past 24 hours, what kind of food you've eaten, which TV shows or movies you've watched, who's produced the music you've listened to, the slang that you've used in conversation. Chances are a large proportion of the cultural choices you make in everyday life are a direct result of globalisation. International travel, immigration and the ever-expanding accessibility of the internet means that now more than ever ideas, values, ideologies and forms of artistic expression and cultural practice are readily transmitted across national and cultural borders. Theoretically, these cultural flows go both ways. However, the process of cultural globalisation has been criticised for being relatively unilateral in practice. Critics of globalisation argue that just as trade between nations isn't truly free and equal under neoliberalism because of existing political and economic imbalances, the nature of the cultural exchange that occurs is also heavily impacted by the same unequal dynamics. They contend that the result of these relationships is not a fair and equal cultural exchange, but cultural imperialism, where a small minority of powerful political and corporate entities predominantly from the West, impose ideas, values and modes of cultural expression onto the rest of the world. Western nations and large transnational corporations based in them are able to do this because they have the economic means necessary to produce a majority of the world's cultural media, including advertising and entertainment. This then allows them to exert a significant cultural influence over other less economically powerful countries. Proponents of this critique contend that not only do Western nations export their cultural products, but in doing so also impose their own values and ideologies onto other nations. These extend from political beliefs, legal principles and ethical doctrines to beauty standards, education and work, and attitudes towards health and medicine. Sociologist George Ritzer's work on the McDonaldization of society provides us with some important insights into how this works in practice. According to Ritzer, the presence of McDonald's restaurants in almost every country in the world is significant because McDonald's operational structure represents a specific type of social organisation. He contends that McDonald's promotes a bureaucratic and rational approach to life that favours efficiency and control over creativity and imagination, and that they sell this way of thinking the world over alongside their burgers and fries. Importantly, like McDonald's, many of the most popular cultural products exported the world over have their roots in the United States of America. In the context of globalisation, there's little doubt that America has been one of the key nations to export aspects of its culture in the form of fast food and coffee outlets, popular music and reality TV shows to other parts of the world. Examples of American cultural imperialism include brand name products, mass-produced food and perhaps of primary importance, media and entertainment. Hollywood films and Coca-Cola don't simply provide a product to sell to overseas markets. They sell a lifestyle and a specific way of seeing the world which is ultimately grounded in American culture. It's not surprising then that one of the most common critiques of globalisation is that it's led to the Americanization of the world. Proponents of this theory argue that globalisation is responsible for upholding rather than challenging American cultural hegemony. This in turn leads to cultural homogenization and standardization as people begin to forgo diverse, localized cultural practices in favour of the dominant modes of Western expression. At face value, it may be easy to agree with the Americanization thesis. Revisit your earlier assessment of the cultural products that you consume throughout your day. A large proportion of them probably originated in America, or have at the very least been influenced by American culture. Popular American holidays like Halloween and Thanksgiving have also started to creep into the cultural milieu in various countries around the world as more and more people celebrate American holidays every year. However, Indian social anthropologist and sociologist Ajahn Appadurai contends that globalisation should not be thought of as cultural imperialism, but that consideration should also be given to the forms of cultural hybridity and heterogeneity that emerge from globalisation. Appadurai suggests that all societies and cultures adopt aspects of globalisation in different ways and at different speeds, and so that rather than having a unifying impact on them, globalisation manifests itself differently in every society. In Appadurai's thesis, media and migration are the most important factors to influence the global cultural changes we're seeing today. However, the impact of these factors on nations depends on a number of other considerations, such as the political stability of the state, the strength of the national economy, and the durability of existing cultural traditions. In other words, he doesn't deny that globalisation affects and shapes cultures, but he also doesn't believe that the result is an Americanization of all cultures. Appiadurai argues instead that cultural identities are becoming less constrained by geographical space or nationality, and as a result, new and hybridized cultural identities are emerging. This leads to greater cultural heterogeneity in some respects and homogeneity in others. What do you think? Does globalization lead to greater cultural homogeneity or cultural hybridity? What are some examples of each? In summary, I talked first about how the process of cultural globalisation has been criticised for being unilateral in practice, leading to cultural imperialism and cultural homogeneity. Second, some theorists refer to this as Americanisation and point to the hegemony of American culture throughout the globe. Third, in contrast, scholars like Ajahn Appiadurai argue for a more nuanced view of globalisation and argue that consideration should also be given to the forms of cultural hybridity and heterogeneity that emerge from globalisation.